Okay. I'm just going to run quickly to get my pen and paper and stuff. Welcome, everybody. It is 2 o'clock. Welcome to the Sasson General Meeting for the Western Cape. I trust that you are all well and healthy. And I just lost the screen that we are working on. So yes, we can start the meeting. Just a reminder, please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question or have something to contribute, and use the question and answer section for the questions for the speaker. Then a reminder of the committee. And I'm going to hand over to Joannette, who will introduce our speaker for today. Joannette, if you can introduce our speaker, and I'll unshare.
Thank you, Joan. Our speaker, we've got 2 speakers today, one of whom you probably know very well. Rinus is the first one. Rinus works for SafeNet, and he is a qualified occupational hygienist. He's going to share with us information on how to conduct a hazard inventory, and also I don't know how many of you know about the changes in the hazardous chemicals agents regulations for 2024. He was present at the webinar yesterday, and he knows quite well what the changes entail, so I'll just share the basics of that. Thank you, Rinus. You can go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Joannette, for the chance to give you a bit more insight on the changes of the new regulations, or the draft regulations for hazardous chemical agents. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
We can see it, thank you.
100%. So I'm Rinus Kriel from SafeNet Africa. I've been in the industry for about 14 years now. And in this 14 years, we've seen the regulations change quite a lot. But it's all for the greater good, or the better conditions in the workplaces, especially regarding the hazardous chemical agents exposure. So firstly, I'm just going to touch on the new contents of the draft regulations. So here we'll see most of these sections, or all the sections that's in black, is still in the draft regulations. Starting with classification of hazardous chemical agents. Previously, it was section 14 in our current regulation. So just to make it clear, the draft regulation is not yet promulgated, so we can't use or work from this regulation, but it's informative and something that we can keep in mind going forward, because yesterday they've announced that they're looking at March 2025 for this regulation or set of regulations to be promulgated. So currently in red, you will see the inventory of hazardous chemical agents. That is something new that's not in our current regulations. And then the hazardous chemical agent risk assessment. that is also new. Previously, currently the regulation only talks about an assessment of potential exposure. And then also the hazardous chemical agent technical committee is also added, that is not in our current regulations. So just to give you a bit of insight of what our current regulation talks about when it comes to the assessment of exposure. If you look at section 3, it says when making the assessment, the employer or self-employed person must keep a record of the assessment and take into account such matters as A, the HEA to which an employee may be exposed to, B, the effects the HEA may have on the employee, C, where the HEA may be present and the physical form in which it is likely to exist, D, the route of intake by which and the extent to which an employee may be exposed, and E, the nature of work process and any reasonable deterioration in or failure of control measures. So I've just quickly added a couple of tables to what an assessment currently entails, or what it entails. So firstly, you will have your brand name or agent. Then you will have your active ingredients. Now I will show you a bit later where to find this information on the SDS or the MSDS data sheet, and then which physical form it is. The next column is the hazardous chemical agent tables, in which table it's listed, and then also the OEL or the occupational exposure limit, or I will also explain a bit more regarding the occupational exposure limits, then the current controls or the control measures required, the route of intake, the effects of the hazardous chemical agent on the employee, and compulsory medical surveillance if required, and the nature of work and exposure. So this is basically everything what the current regulation requires us to have in the assessment of potential exposure. Just going to go back to that section 3. So I've just added a couple of detail to this table so it makes more sense. So firstly, you would have the chemical name, which is in this case is chemical X, and then in that chemical you will find a composition of or multiple other chemicals. In this case it's acetone, and then you will have that D-acid, or as we call it as D-acid, and then isopropyl or isopropanol. And in our act, in our hazardous chemical agent regulations, in the tables you will find the listed chemical, and in that table you would find if it has any notations, and in this case none of these chemicals have notations that says it's maybe listed as a carcinogen, or it can be absorbed through the skin, it has a skin notation, and then also your OELs. Now the OELs is more appropriate for us as occupational hygienists, or your approved inspection authority that would measure the applicable chemical, because that gives us an indication of what the exposure would be to a certain chemical in the workplace. And then your control measures that you will find also in the SDS. But let's move to the next slide, and I will come back to this table again. So the new regulation, or the draft regulation, talks about an inventory of hazardous chemical agents. Now, I must say it's much more concise, much more clearer for whoever needs to implement the regulation, where it states an employer must ensure, as far as reasonably practicable, that an inventory of HEAs used, handled, or stored at the workplace is prepared and kept at the workplace. And the inventory is maintained to ensure the information is up to date. Section 2 states that the inventory must include. Now, I've also compiled basically a columns that includes all the necessary information from section 2, which states a list of HEAs used, handled or stored, the current SDS for each HEA, and the work area where the HEA is used. So that's relatively straightforward into what exactly the inventory of hazardous chemical agents is going to be, or is going to require from the employer. But again, this is not yet, the regulation is not yet promulgated, so we still need to work according to section 5, number 3, that states we need an assessment of exposure. The inventory must include the following sections, so it's very easy. You have your hazardous chemical name or product name, which is the chemical which is usually on the canister or the tub or the bucket, wherever the chemical is stored, the name that's given to that chemical. Then we also are going to include the active ingredient, because that's going to give you more information regarding sampling and medical surveillance or screening. And then your SDS available, that should be available, and then your work area, or the area where it's used, and also the nature of the work, because that's going to give you information regarding how exposure can possibly occur when doing your risk assessment. So relatively straightforward, section 2. And in section 3, the employer must ensure that the inventory is readily accessible to any employee involved in using, handling, or storing an HEA. So that will basically entail that every area where there's chemicals used, there must be a demarcated or a section or area where this inventory would be available, and then with that, your STSs as well, and anyone else who is likely to be affected by the HEA. Now that would also include any contractors coming onto site, that in any induction or that whenever they come onto site, that they are made conversant with the hazards in the form of hazardous chemical agents on site. In section 4, in inventory is not required if the HEA is in transit. The HEA is a consumer product where the employer is a retailer. In subsection, quantities that are consistent with household use. So you don't need an inventory if you store chemicals at your home, and in a manner that is consistent with household use, and a manner that is incidental to the nature of the work carried out by an employee using the HEA. So again, there's the inventory, or the example of how an inventory of hazardous chemical agents looks like. Now, again, this is within our draft regulation. And then the regulation also talks about section 10 of the draft regulation. It has this chemical agent risk assessment. Now, this is a bit more detailed. If you compare it to our current assessment of potential exposure, you have a lot more information. This document is going to take much more time to compile, much more information and role players to get the relevant information. But firstly, if you look at section C, it says by a competent person. Now, currently, our regulation, or current regulation, talks about when making the assessment, the employer, self-employed person must keep a record of the assessment, and it does not state competent person. So, and the reason for the competent person would be if you look at the information that's needed in this document, in future, occupational hygienists, occupational health nurses, everybody needs to work together to compile this specific hazardous chemical agent risk assessment, because you will need a lot more information, information that the hygienist solely can't gather by themselves, especially when it comes to vulnerable employees. And the focus in this regulation, or this draft regulation, you can see is a lot on vulnerable employees as well. And that information, again, we won't be able to know when coming onto a site. So just to run through this, when HEA is present in the workplace, the employer must cause a documented risk assessment of an HEA to be carried out immediately after intervals not exceeding 24 months by a competent person using the information gathered in sub-regulations regarding the SEGs, which is the similar exposure groups. I will touch on the similar exposure groups when it comes to the sampling as well a bit later. And in taking into account at least the following, the scope of the risk assessment include work area, job and position classifications and inventory of tasks within a job, the nature of task-specific exposure, considering HEA exposure concentrations, durations and frequencies of tasks. So here you will see a lot of new information that is not in our current regulations. And just for interest's sake, the second last sentence refers to autotoxic chemical agents. Now, I don't know if you know what autotoxic chemical agents, or if everybody knows what it is, but this is very interesting. Just to give you a brief overview of autotoxicity, in simple terms, it's basically the poisoning of the ear, which can result in exposure, or which results from exposure to drugs or chemicals that damage the inner ear nerves. So basically, not only this noise exposure can damage your hearing, but there's certain chemicals, and with the draft regulation, that included those chemicals in the notation section to make the employees basically aware of what chemicals can cause hearing loss. Just a couple of examples of autotoxicants. So chemicals that have potential to affect some parts of the ear. Substances including certain pesticides, solvents, and pharmaceuticals contain autotoxicants. Autotoxicants can negatively affect how the ear functions, causing hearing loss and will affect balance regardless of noise exposure. So that's very important, and we've already, from our side, look at autotoxic chemicals and made note of that in our reports from basically when the draft regulations was promulgated. Even though the regulation's not promulgated yet, it's good to have that additional info. And whenever those regulations are promulgated, we know we are ready from our side to identify those wherever we conduct our occupational hygiene surveys. Now, just a couple of examples of autotoxicants in the workplace. You will find it in some solvents, nitriles, insecticides. So there's just a bit more information on those. Just to go back, sorry, I'm just jumping around through the slides. And then as this chemical agent risk assessment continues, this is for the draft. So again, I'm not going to go through everything. It's more important that you know how to compile the inventory, because this hazardous chemical agent risk assessment, again, when it's promulgated, there's going to be a lot more role players involved when this assessment or this risk assessment is compiled. And then section 3 is the employer must indicate appropriate controls in the HEA risk assessment in terms of regulation 11, where there is a risk to health indicated by the risk assessment conducted, the review conducted in terms of sub-regulation 2, and the results of an exposure monitoring carried out in accordance with regulation 13. Now, when we do our assessments, that's basically where we are the specialists when it comes to determining who is going to be, who the worker is that's going to be monitored, what sampling methods is the best for an appropriate scenario or certain scenario. So currently our regulation refers to the USM, or the Occupational Exposure Sampling Strategy Manual. Now the draft regulations talks about the similar exposure groups where we need to identify similar exposure groups, and for each group you will have to take a minimum of 3 samples. Now currently it's not part of our regulation, so we work according to this USM document. Now, if you go to the table, you would see the size of the group and then the required number of measured employees. Now, just to give you a bit more information regarding the cost when it comes to samples, it is quite expensive. Now, if we work straight from this USM document, the cost would be enormous, and nobody would be able to afford doing any sampling. So what we now do is we state in our reports that we deviate from this USM, and we select the worst exposed environment. Up until the draft regulations gets promulgated, we can then work from or with that 3 samples in a similar exposure group. But for now, this is the only guidance or guideline that we can use. So whenever we get to a site and there are, let's say, 3 or 4 employees doing mostly the same job where exposure is a concern, we will look at the most exposed employee when we conduct our air monitoring. So an OEL, and I touched on the OEL a bit earlier, that is more for our use. It is useful for you to know what the OEL is and how to implement it, but at the end, it's the approved inspection authority that's going to measure your hazardous chemical agents that uses this OEL as a guideline to see if any exposure is in excess of a certain level. Now, the OEL means a limit value set by the minister, which represents the airborne concentration of a hazardous chemical agent, where the exposure standard may be either an 8-hour time-weighted average, a ceiling limit, or a short-term exposure limit. Now, when we look at certain processes, when we come out to do the monitoring, we would firstly determine if the employee is exposed to whichever chemical for how long duration during their shift. And then with that information, we will determine, are we going to monitor for at least 80% of that employee's shift, or are we going to monitor a shorter period because it's only exposed within a smaller or a lesser time within his or her shift to that certain chemical. Because some of the chemicals in our hazardous chemical tables only has a STEL, which is a short-term exposure limit, and then we can't work with an 8-hour. Now the OEL-ML, which stands for the occupational exposure limit, the maximum limit, it means all the chemicals listed in table 2 of Annexure 2, and the OEL-RL, which is the occupational exposure limit, restricted limit, means an HEA as listed in table 3 of Annexure 2. And then we have the short-term exposure limit. Now this is just definitions of some of the notations that's in our current regulation. And like I said, the autotoxic chemicals is now one that's added to, or will be added when the draft regulations come out. This is just straight out of the regulation regarding air monitoring, just to give you an idea when air monitoring needs to be conducted. So it's where the inhalation of an HEA is concerned. An employer contemplated in Regulation 5.4 must ensure that the measurement program of airborne concentrations of the HEA to which an employee is exposed to is carried out in accordance with these regulations. Now, again, with the draft regulations, some of these wording has changed, but again, up until that promulgated, I think that is again, it's more for the AIA when it comes to air monitoring. But just to give you a couple of ideas on the sampling types we use in industry. So you have your active, on the left side, you have your active air monitoring, which is a sample that is used, or we use a sampling pump with a sampling train. And on the right-hand side, you have your passive air monitoring sample, which relies on the ambient air movement of certain HEAs onto the sorbent medium. But this will be determined by what chemical you want to monitor for, because you would always also find tube sampling. And there is an example of how the tube sampling works. And in this picture, that pump section would then be attached to an employee to simulate his or her breathing, and the air is drawn through the sampling media. Whatever chemicals is in the air or would be inhaled would also be captured onto the sampling media and then sent away for analysis to determine if the exposure is below or above the OELs. And just to give you an idea of where exactly the monitoring equipment is fitted, on the left-hand side, you would see is a 30 centimeter breathing zone. So we try to be as accurate as possible when simulating the employee's exposure and putting it in his breathing zone. And then on the right-hand side, that's just information that we capture to make sure that we have included all variables on that day. And then also what exactly the employee's job title is, what exactly they do, what type of PPE they have, because all of that plays a role at the end when determining his or her exposure. Now, when the sampling is completed, either particulates, fibers, gases, or vapors, or fumes, the samples is then sent to an external laboratory. So we are the specialists in capturing the hazardous chemicals on site to see what employees' exposures on site is. The external laboratories are responsible for analyzing those hazardous chemical agents and giving us a result. And then again, we look at legislation, comparing it to the occupational exposure limits. Now, this is the document we use, the sampling method, as we call it. So this is a sampling method for phenol. Now, on the left-hand side, you would see it in red, it's highlighted the sampler or the sampling medium that's required, the necessary flow rate, and the minimum and maximum volumes we need to capture on site to get an appropriate or a valid reading when it gets sent to the external laboratory. But that, again, this is nothing that you need to do on site. We will determine what, if you compile the inventory of hazardous chemical agents or compile your assessment of potential exposure, we use that information to determine the sampling strategies and knives or the sampling methods to effectively see what an employee's exposure is to a certain chemical. Now, where the methods are obtained, so we get our information and methods from the CDC, that we work from NICE for OSHA methods. And this is just to give you an idea of the type of chemicals that we can. I just want to open up another document. So this is the list of chemicals that can be monitored. And here's a couple of pesticides or pesticides. And here you would see the method for each chemical. On the left-hand side, you will see the types of chemicals that can be measured. Sorry, now I've lost my space. So there's the list of some of the chemicals we can measure. Now, safety data sheet on STS, that is where you will find the information regarding a certain chemical. Your safety data sheet has the sections, and the first section is the important section. That's the identification of the substance or mixture and of the company undertaking. So that is the name of the chemical. And then secondly, or the second section, your hazard identification. That's also important. But section 3 is the composition information on ingredients. Now I just want to scroll. This is just an example of a material safety data sheet. Now there you can see section 1 is your chemical product and company identification. So that's the name, the product name. In this case, it's acetone. Section 2 is your composition and information on ingredients. Now, this is very important because some chemicals would have multiple subchemicals in this section. And even though the main chemical or the main component is not, let's say, very hazardous, there may be other chemicals within that chemical that would be listed in table 4, or maybe it has a carcinogenic, or it's listed as a carcinogen. So that's why it's so important when looking at an STS is to basically dissect each chemical and looking at all its components. So that's your section 3. And the rest of the information, again, is also important, but when doing your assessment of potential exposure, you are actually just interested in the HEA to which an employee may be exposed to, the effects of that HEA that you will find within your safety data sheet, and then see where the HEA may be present and the physical form it is likely to be in, so that, and sometimes it differs. So sometimes you have to look in section 1, 2, 3, 4, and section 7 or section 8 for certain information. And I must say, I've worked with a lot of different STSs, and some companies include a lot more information than others. But that's why it's important to have a GHS compliant STS, because a GHS compliant STS would more likely then include all the relevant information that you would need to basically compile your inventory of hazardous chemical agents or your assessment of potential exposure. And not to confuse you, the inventory of hazardous chemical agents is still in our draft regulations. Currently, it's still the assessment of potential exposure. Your UN or your GHS is the globally harmonized system, means the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals. It's a guidance document developed by the United Nations for standardizing and harmonizing the classification and labeling of chemicals globally, as may be updated from time to time. And again, back to the STS, this is just an example of an STS. And yeah, that's basically it from my side. I don't know if there's any questions. I haven't looked at the chat box. I don't know if there's anything. And I am more than willing to share with you, Annette, all the tables we have and all the information we have, and then she can distribute it to whoever needs anything.
Yes, there is a question. You just see. Yolande asked, can autotoxic hearing loss be reported to the Compensation Commission, I suspect, as an occupational disease?
Well, again, currently in our regulation, it's not yet in our current regulation. So the only in sorry, I just want to stop sharing on this side.
It's fine. We can't see your screen.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Rinus? Nothing. Okay. Rinus, thank you very much. This was very informative. If the members want to see the table of the hazardous or the hazard inventory or the information that they can fill in for that, it would be great if I could just share that, even if it's just the one slide with them. Thank you. But I'll talk to you afterwards.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate
Bye-bye.
your time. All right. Okay. Next up is Cheryl. Cheryl Ann Bursky from Pathcare. She doesn't need any introduction. Cheryl, just let us see if your mic is working. Just unmute.
Okay, I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Cheryl, welcome. I
Thank you.
don't have a long introduction for you because I'm sure everybody knows you. So welcome and thank you for taking the time off to share with us the information. I hand over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to try sharing my screen. If you can just let me know when you can see it.
We can see it. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. And is it in presenter view or not yet? Let's see. Can you see the full slide? Ionette, can you hear me?
Sorry, we see the presenter view, but it's okay. It's nice and clear.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so thank you very much, Sashon, for this opportunity. And I hope that my presentation from a laboratory service perspective of hazardous chemical agent regulation testing is as informative as Rinus. So, and just quickly on that little picture that I've got there, because I'm in the company of health professions, I have to say that Google took a little bit of poetic license here, because this laboratory tech would only get 1 out of 3 for PPE, and that's for her goggles, because in the real world, she definitely would need to be wearing gloves and close her lab coat. And also, I note that there is some green fluid in that test tube. I don't know. Maybe there's an alien Vulcan that's been tested. Okay, so just a quick recap on the difference between biological monitoring and biological effect monitoring. Biological monitoring is a way of assessing chemical exposures by measuring the actual chemical or its breakdown products, which we can also call metabolites or the active ingredient, in a biological sample, and that's usually done on urine, blood, or breath. But for the laboratory purpose, this would only be urine or blood. We don't do any breath tests in the laboratory. And an example of biological monitoring is the measurement of lead in the blood sample of a worker exposed to lead dust. Where biological effect monitoring, on the other hand, is the measurement of the biological effects on the body systems that results from the absorption of chemicals. And examples here would be the measurement of protein in a urine sample of a worker exposed to cadmium, and that's to check their kidney function, or liver function tests, liver enzyme tests done on workers who are exposed to MEK, methyl ethyl ketone. So this is a snippet from the current regulation, the HCA regs of 2021. That's still still current. It's not going to change in the new update. The employer must still ensure that employees are under medical surveillance if they are exposed to any of the hazardous chemical agents that would be listed in Table 4. And the complete list of Table 4 currently is Annexure 2 of the regulation. And there's about 43 chemicals listed in Table 4 And unfortunately, or there's only 6 that are not available if you test via PathCare. So I've listed them there on the slide. But fortunately, in our experience, there hasn't been any requests to date for these particular chemicals. But should the need arise at feasible volumes, we would certainly consider these for development. And then once the 2024 updates are promulgated, we will update our test reference ranges and test lists accordingly. We envisage that there might be some changes in the BEI, or the biological exposure indices. And basically what these are is guidance values for assessing the biological monitoring results. And in essence, it would be the normal reference range for the results interpretation. So when does the pathology laboratory fit into this whole process? So pretty much once Rinus and the specialist teams have been in and assessed and established which chemicals are used. Now he referred to the inventory of the hazardous chemical agents that is coming in. And once you've obtained the exposure measurement and calculated the risk factors, and addressed the risk factors, and established who needs to be tested for what exposure, you can contact your pathology laboratory to arrange for testing. Okay, so now I'm putting on my marketing hat quickly. And a very useful tool for all things in occupational health pathology testing is PathCare's Occupational Health Reference Guide. So make sure you get a copy if you don't have one. This current version was updated in 2022 on the changes that happened then in the HCA regs in 2021. And we will revise this again for the new update, which now I know, thank you, Rinus, is expected round about March 2025. So this is an easy to use guide, and in the biological monitoring section, we list the chemical that can be tested for, indicating if it's table 3 or table 4, what the industrial use is, the biological sample that's required, the biological exposure index or reference range measurement, info on the metabolites and other effect monitoring tests that can also be done, and the time the sample should be taken, the health effects and symptoms of exposure as well. And additional information in this reference guide is specimen collection instructions, pathology screen guidelines, industrial and agricultural testing, food handler information, drug testing information, along with some occupational health test articles. So get a copy or copies for your clinics, and you can contact Sister Rose Castles or myself for this, and I will have our contact info on our last slide. So now the next steps. When you're ready to move forward to doing the testing, the regulations require that there should be analytical methods available of sufficient sensitivity and specificity to detect concentrations of the agent in biological media in the range likely to be encountered in industry. So now that is very technical speak, but in plain English, it means choose an accredited laboratory, like PathCare. So for pathology laboratory testing and biological sample analysis, the SANIS accreditation would be ISO 15189 and 17025. And from there, you set up a trading relationship with the laboratory of your choice. And what you would need is to have a corporate account and a referral code that identifies your company on the laboratory system. And this referral code or mnemonic is linked to your company info, and it drives the system setup of who gets the results, how they get the results, and who the billing goes to. And this account or referral code setup is done as a once-off with your first-time referral. Those who choose PathCare as the laboratory would receive the client information form. I've got a little screenshot of it. It's a one-page document that you need to complete with your company information, and then also give us the information of who gets the results and who the billing goes to. Okay, and then for budgeting purposes and to raise a purchase order number on your system, we say request a quotation. The test prices generally increase with CPI annually on the 1st of January and are valid until the 31st of December unless otherwise notified. So You only need to get a quote once if you're going to be doing repeat testing. The quotation will indicate what the price validity is. And once all the admin setup is done and completed, it's then time to decide on when you will need to do your sample collection, bearing in mind the correct sampling time. So here you can consult your occupational health reference guide from Pathcare, but pretty much if testing needs to be done prior to shift, that means sampling is 16 hours after the exposure ceases. So before the new shift starts. If testing needs to be done during a shift, that is after 2 hours exposure. If it's end of shift, it is as soon as possible after exposure of a minimum of 6 hours, and that's normally around about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And end of shift, end of work week will be at the end of a shift after 4 to 5 days of exposure. So that would normally be a Thursday or a Friday after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And for tests that require a urine sample for the analysis, it needs to be a nice full container. So we ask that you remind the employee not to empty their bladder before coming for the test and to drink a glass of water about half an hour or an hour before they're due to come for their test. And very important, label the sample with the employee's name and ensure that the urine container is nice and tightly closed. Okay, so when you've established when you're going to be doing the sample collection, and if you're going to be doing that yourself in your clinic, you can contact your laboratory service provider for the required stock and the personalized request form with that unique code of yours on it. And once the sampling is completed, you can then contact the lab to send a driver to collect the samples from the clinic. You just need to ensure that the urine samples are kept in a fridge or on ice packs until they collect. And should you require the assistance of the laboratory for any blood tests that need to be done, you can contact the service provider and see if they can assist. I can say that the laboratory would appreciate about 1 to 2 weeks notice in order to just adjust their roster to have a nurse or phlebotomy team available. And it is requested that on-site pathology or phlebotomy is done for 10 or more employees to be tested. The employee can also make use of the laboratory's collection depots to have their sample collected, and no appointment would be necessary there. Okay, and finally, the test turnaround time for results does vary. Effect monitoring, for example, liver functions, full blood counts, and kidney functions, these results are generally available within 12 to 24 hours after receipt at the testing laboratory. But the hazardous chemicals is normally batched. So these results can take anywhere from 7 to 14 days for a result. The test results will print with the normal reference ranges, and any result outside of these reference ranges will be flagged. A pathologist signs out the results, and a pathologist on call for the relevant lab department will be available for a consultation if needed. And we just ask that you please give the laboratory reference number when phoning for a consult or if you have a query. And where purchase order numbers are required for payment purposes, you can record this on the request form and it will be captured on the result as well as the invoice. Billing will be on test completion, so only once it's resulted, and generally payment terms with the labs are 30 days from invoicing. So now we're going to move on to a real life example of information that was given by an occupational health nurse practitioner to her team on acetone testing requirements. So what statements here do you think are true, if any, and which are false? So I'm going to read the written transcript of a verbal instruction. It reads as follows. Good day, everybody. Acetone is a chemical that affects the skin. If you're exposed to it, it can cause skin irritation. Mostly the eyes can be affected if you smell it, and also maybe droplets. So look at the skin. Seeing that we are already doing a urine test, we will also look at the urine for someone who inhaled acetones more than a certain percentage that becomes dangerous to the system. We will see in the urine we normally pick up ketones most of the time with acetone. we see in the urine, if there's lots of ketones in your urine, then you will know that there's a high possibility that you have inhaled so much acetone fumes. And if it's too much ketones in the urine, that person has to be referred to do bloods. Then, first we start with the light investigation and then we go deeper. First we start with the urine and see if there's too much in the urine, and if you're working with acetone, we will then have to refer you to do bloods. That's how it works. We will see tomorrow the exposure, but there should be a safety officer who knows these things. So let's just quickly first talk about ketones and the clinical significance of ketones in the urine. So now we go back to our nursing days and what we learned. If your cells can't get enough glucose, your body breaks down fat for energy instead. That produces an acid called ketones, which can build up in your blood and urine. Having some ketones in your urine is normal, but high ketone levels in the urine may be a sign that your body is too acidic, which is ketoacidosis. If you test positive for ketones, it could mean that your diabetes is not under control and you could have diabetic ketoacidosis. People who do not eat enough calories can also develop high levels of ketones. And this includes people who suffer from alcoholism and those with an eating disorder or malnutrition from a severe illness such as cancer. But measuring ketones in the urine is not a biological effect monitoring test for acetone. So what does PathCare's Occupational Reference Guide and the Hazardous Chemical Regulations say about acetone? So incidentally, acetone is the smallest member of the ketone family, but that's where that ends. It is a manufactured chemical, and it's also found in plants, in trees, volcanic gases, forest fires, and it's a product of body fat breakdown. It is present in vehicle exhaust, tobacco smoke, and landfill sites. It's a colorless liquid with a distinct smell and taste. It evaporates easily, is highly flammable. It's used as an industrial solvent in resins, lacquers, oils, fats, cotton, cellulose acetate, and acetylene. It's also used in the paint, lacquer, varnish, rubber, plastics, dyeing, celluloid, photographic and explosive industries, and in the manufacture of artificial silk and synthetic leather. So it's quite common. So now, according to the Hazardous Chemical Agent Regulations, acetone should be tested on a urine sample. The biological exposure index is 30 grams per milligrams of creatinine, and the OSH Act reference uses a different unit of measurement for the BEI as 25 milligrams per liter. So the yellow screenshot there is just a screenshot of a result report example, and we give you results for the BEI units measurements of both the HEA regs and also in the unit measurement of the OSH Act. And every chemical tested, we also do a urine creatinine. And the reason for this is that very concentrated or very dilute urine is not generally suitable for monitoring. So we give you that creatinine ratio to determine that. And the causes for a low creatinine value, which is a dilute sample, could be kidney damage or disease, overhydration, muscle wasting, diabetes, medications like antibiotics or paracetamol. And a concentrated sample with a raised creatinine can be due to diabetes, high muscle tone, kidney problems, dehydration, creatine supplements, pregnancy, obesity, or a raised blood pressure. Acetone can also be measured in blood, but this is not the regulated sample type according to the regs. And looking at the metabolism, acetone is highly volatile and can be inhaled in large quantities when present in high concentrations. It may be absorbed into the blood through the lungs and diffused throughout the body, but it can also be absorbed through the skin. It is metabolized slowly, primarily through the liver. The highest concentration in the urine is after about 3.5 hours post-exposure, and exhalation is the major route of elimination. The sampling time is end of shift. So as a reminder, that is collected after a minimum of 6 hours exposure. And the health effects and typical symptoms of exposure are narcosis, slight skin irritation, a more pronounced mucous membrane irritation, and exposure to high concentrations produces a feeling of unrest, followed by collapse, stupor, periodic breathing, and finally coma. Nausea and vomiting may occur and sometimes followed by hematemesis. Ingestion of high levels can result in unconsciousness and damage to the mouth. Skin contact causes irritation. In cases of repeated exposure to low concentration, headaches, drowsiness, vertigo, throat irritation, and coughing may occur. So how did our occupational health nurse fare with her info? Sadly, she missed the mark as only the first sentence has some truth in it. Acetone is a chemical that affects the skin. If you're exposed to it, it can cause skin irritation, but so much more. Okay, and this is my last slide, and here with our contact details. So contact myself or Sister Rose for the current version of the Occupational Health Reference Guide, or if we can assist you in any way with your testing requirements. And I want to say thank you so much to the session committee and today's attendees for this opportunity to bring you a pathology laboratory perspective and also to do some marketing of our services. And we do hope that we can be of service to you for your occupational health pathology needs.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I see Yolandi has her hand up. Yolandi, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Hello, Cheryl.
Hello, Yolandi.
I just want to know something more for clarity. I know when we send urine samples in, we also need to do the creatinine test. So we actually we used another service provider and they didn't do the creatinine test, although it was definitely written on the form. So I'm assuming that they only do the creatinine then if the sample is very diluted, or is it generally done with a test with everything?
So I can only speak for our practice at Pathcare, but we do a urine creatinine on every urine sample submitted for biological monitoring, because we need to also for you to be able to interpret the results, especially if you get a result outside of the reference ranges that could have been affected by either the sample being too diluted or the sample being too concentrated.
That's the thing, So no, everybody doesn't do that, even though it is on the form. So I only assumed they just, thought they're not going to do it because the urine sample was not diluted. I don't know.
Yes. So we will continue with the sample, sort of regardless of what the creatinine value is, but we give you that on the report so that you can that the sample was within normal creatinine ranges, and and that wouldn't have affected the biological monitoring results.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Cheryl. And thank you specifically for sharing that example of the acetone. It shows you what kind of information is in your, your reference guide. All right, so it's really important that all of us get a reference guide. I understand that we can download it from your website as well.
That's correct. Or you can request an electronic version of the booklet as well, which we can email to you.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a very useful guide to have so that you can look up what the appropriate tests are for the chemicals people are exposed to. Thank you very much. People, I'm going to ask you not to leave. There's a lot of very important information that we're going to share with you during the meeting. So please don't leave yet. Just stay on a few minutes longer. Thank you, Joan. I'm handing over to you.
Thanks, Ionette, and thank you again to our speakers just for making us understand what this hazardous chemical agents is all about. Welcome, everybody, and especially those that joined us later. Apologies will be noted by Yolandi for those that sent apologies to her. Is there any additions to the agenda?
Okay. I don't see any.
Then I would need the people that has got the eyes on the members to just help me with this. The last minutes was those of 29 March. The minutes were emailed to everybody. If you have not received it, there's a problem with your email, please contact your caregiver, because we are getting a lot of emails bouncing back. It has also been circulated via the WhatsApp group. If the Western Cape members are not on the WhatsApp group and wants to join the WhatsApp group, just contact your caregiver to actually send you the notification so that you can join the WhatsApp group. The WhatsApp group is very active, so mute the group. Can I please have adoptions of the previous minutes? Thanks, Kathleen. And seconded. Thanks, Sandra Hanekom. Then I'm handing over to your EXCO representative, who is Yolandi Jooste. Yolandi, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So this might sound like I'm really going on about this at every meeting, but it is very important for you to update all your information on the Sashon website. There's 2 different people who work at regional office, so everything related to your audio requirements, you email Gita, and then your general requirements or questions or forms or anything you email Adele. When you do email Gita with regards to any audio information you need, please just give her your AR number. Gita doesn't work with our SANC or our Sashon number. She works with our AR numbers. And then the CFP broker fees, please be reminded that this is only for Sashon members at the lower price. They have an arrangement with Sashon, and there are people that's paying the lower price. It is a bit of a technicality that's busy being sorted out. But yeah, the fee is not for every occupational health nurse, only if you're a Sashon member. And then just a reminder about the national conference at the end of the year in Mpumalanga, and that is from the 20th to the 22nd of November. That information will still be coming through about the prices and the accommodation, etc. And then the fees for this year. I always want to be in 2025 already. So there's the fees for anybody that has not paid yet. There's still time to pay. And then we will, by the end of the year, we will have the fees for 2025. For now, from me, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda. Then our financial feedback. Currently, we are very sound, financially stable. In our current account, we have 55,150 Rand, and in our savings account, 159,034 Rand, bringing our total to 214 Rand and 2,114 Rand and 185. The financials are sent in the minutes. So if you've got any questions or queries on financials, you're welcome to contact me and I can answer it for you. But currently our biggest expense remains CPD. And the expense that you see on meetings workshop, you must actually read that with the income, because that is for the training sessions that we have. Any questions on financials? Except that I can't read numbers today. Could I have somebody to accept the financials? Thanks, Kathleen, and somebody to second. Thanks, Pietronella. Our educational report and CPD, I'm handing over to Joannette. Joannette.
Thank you, Joan. I include this with every meeting so that you can see how well we are doing compared to other regions. We are told that the attendance is not great. It's because they still have face-to-face meetings, and I think the format that we're doing it in at the moment is very useful, especially for people that's far away, like George or any other part of the country for that matter. We welcome members from other regions to as well. I think our training topics are quite good and interesting. So if you know of anybody who would like to join, please forward the invite to them as soon as we send it out. Thank you, Joan. Next one. This is the remaining topics for the year. We swapped the workshop, the mini virtual workshop was supposed to be on the hazard chemical agents. We swapped it with IOD management because the person who's going to present the IOD management is really an expert on it. And he presented, I think, at the beginning of last year, and he mentioned that the time was a little bit short. So we swapped it with the idea that the mini virtual workshop will provide enough time for him to share with you what you need to know. This workshop is also open to anybody that's not a nurse. If you know of your HR people or your safety people or managers or supervisors or anybody in your company or any friends or anybody that would like to join, it's via Teams, so they can join from anywhere. It's really promising to be a great workshop. And it doesn't cost that much. And then also our kaleidoscope, the topic is on ergonomics, and we've got really a great range of speakers, as you've seen on the invite, some familiar names, some new ones, but they're really experts on their topics. Please, if you can, join the ergonomics. It's a face-to-face workshop. And if you need a quote, please send Joan an email so that she can do that for you in time. Right, and then our AGM, this will be a voting AGM on the 25th of September. It's also a face-to-face. We will send you the venue as soon as it is confirmed. And then our last meeting for the year will be in October, hopefully with a new committee. Yeah, just take note of this, the dates, and put it out in your calendar so that you don't miss them. Some feedback on the short webinar that we presented at the beginning of June. It wasn't a planned webinar. It was just something that came up after a long discussion on one of the groups. We realized that there's really a need for people to learn more about substance abuse management. We've heard everything 200 times already. And if you've ever worked with Dr. Greg Q, you've heard it 1,000 times already. But many of us don't have that kind of exposure, so it was quite useful. There was almost 800 people that registered, and just over 450 attended. Some of them tried to attend, but there was some connectivity issues because of the setup of the webinar. It's been resolved, so if we do have a webinar going forward, we can accommodate up to 1,000 people. We would very much like to see this kind of attendance with the IOD management workshop. So please encourage whomever you think may benefit from it to register and join in on the day. It will be a paid workshop, whereas this one was a free workshop. Thanks. Next one. This is, if you have been to the previous workshop, you would have probably downloaded the QR scanner. And you will know what to do with it. I've also embedded a link or shortcut in the chat. Just scroll up right to the top and you will see this. Just open it and you can scan the QR code. It will take you straight to the nomination form for the new committee. We've up to date, we've received 19 separate nominations with lots of names. So thank you for everybody for that. If you can't access this or you don't know how, please send me a WhatsApp. I will send you the nomination, the link to the nomination. Right, next one. This is the ergonomics workshop I talked about earlier. We are giving a free ergonomic gift to the first 40 people who pay and register. well, register and then pay. So do that as soon as you can so that we know how many want to have the gift. The program, as you see here, is all the latest details, and you can see that it's not just nurses, it's occupational therapists, physiotherapists, and Dale that we all know very well. And the last two will be two OHMPs that has a lot of experience with the topic that they're presenting. It's really going to be a great event, and we hope to see you there. There's the QR code. You can either click on the link that says register now if you've got the PDF document, or you can just scan the QR code. It will take you to the registration page. Any financial requests or requests for quotes can be sent to Joan. Her email address is there at the bottom, joan@OcuCare. Next one. And I've talked about the IOD management with Kwanele. It will be on the 30th of August. Please join us for that one too. Good. Now, the important thing, we've talked about this at previous meetings, but I just want to bring it under your attention again. There were several cases of fraud or unethical practice reported to us, two that I've reported to the HPCSA. Unfortunately, they don't provide feedback, or they haven't yet, but this specific, the first one, the first two ANAs, I've also reported to the Labour Inspector last week. Finally, I could find somebody that's in that region, and they promised to go out and investigate. So hopefully we will see some results happening there. The employer will be the one that's fined because he doesn't provide medical surveillance as it is required in the OSH Act. And ANA as an ambulance assistant, they are not qualified to do OH assessments or to do primary health care. It's not in their scope of practice. So that's why I reported them to the governing body. And then SANC, I've reported a ENA for performing OH assessments and signing COFs. Fortunately, she put her full name and surname on there, as well as I think her SANC number was also there, so we could identify her. And she also did audios without being registered as an audiometrist. That was easy to determine. I just asked Gita to look and see if she's on the register. And then also one person who listed the false SANC number on her stamp. I confirmed with SANC that there's no such person listed on the register. I haven't received any feedback from them apart from them asking me to send an affidavit, which I did, and then hopefully as soon as we get any feedback, we will let you know. Next one. If you are aware of any activities that you suspect are either fraudulent or unethical, please let us know. We want to do something about it. And even if we start slowly with one success, we are doing something to promote our profession and make the people aware of the fact that the law says that medicals need to be done by OHPs. So please let us know when you are aware of anything. We know of a company based in Cape Town who is using ENAs to man clinics and do OH assessments, audiometry at various clients. We are in the process of getting more information to report this company. So if you are aware of any unethical practice like this, I will in the next slide, I will tell you how to report it. And then we also know of an OHMP, two now, that is signing COFs without performing the OH assessment him or herself. The investigation is ongoing. If you know about things like this, it's difficult to prove. But if you know about practices like this, especially if you've got the nice and good evidence, please send it to me. Next one. Report this. Any person performing OH assessments which is not an OHMP or an OMP, even GPs, if the regulations say an OHP must perform the assessment, not even a GP can do that. So it needs to be an OHNP or an OMP. If you know about a company who's using ENAs or ENs to practice OH without supervision or to do tasks specifically assigned to RNs, like dispensing medicine or perform assessments, please let us know. Any person who signs a COF without performing the OH assessment, let us know. And any person who falsifies information, this is also that same company that I talked about, issues certificates of service and falsifies the OMP signatures. The OMPs are aware of that. We just need to contact them to identify next steps, because this is fraud. Next one. So this is what we need. You can take a photograph of a suspicious document. Please don't erase the name of the provider or the client. It helps us to get to the right people. If you are afraid that they are going to be able to identify you, please let me know so that I can handle it with sensitivity. I will not divulge your name to anybody, not even the committee. So if you send it to my email address, you are safe. And then we also require, where possible, the name, surname, SANC number, HPCSA number, or the ID number of the suspected individual. As you know, on SANC's website, we cannot search under name or surname. We can only search on ID number or SANC number, and without that information, I cannot report them to SANC. There's no way for me to identify that person. So if you have, even if you just write the SANC number in your email, that will also be fine, or the ID number. And as I promised, your details will remain anonymous. That wording should be taken out if you so choose. I treat everybody as anonymous unless they are willing to talk about it themselves. And the reporting will not be done by you. It will be done by someone else. So please feel free to step up and let us weed out all these illegal people who do illegal medicals. Next slide. Am I done? Thank you.
You're done for now. Oh, sorry. Out. I just need to go back. Our next portfolio will be the PR portfolio. Yolandi, it is over to you again.
Thank you. So I'm just highlighting the social platforms. I feel like I'm doing more socials than PR. I said this before, but I mean, we are reaching a lot of new people with it, so something must be working. So there is a Western Cape Facebook page. There is a session collaboration, which is all the regions. Then we've got a Twitter page of, it's called X now, and then we've also got a LinkedIn page. So just join everything, keep an eye on articles, and actually some nighttime reading. Sometimes you go down a bit of a rabbit hole, but always good to get some reading in. And then the next slide, I just want to highlight the purpose of digital PR. It's a communication from Sashon's side to the public, which includes our members, but also other people of the public. So we want to cultivate a public image. We want a good reputation for our brand. We respond to public discourse and engaging with audiences. So if people want to know things about Sashon, they contact. There's a lot of messages that come through on LinkedIn, which is great. So we answer that, we try to engage with the people, and then we shape and maintain a positive image through communication and then brand management. So we try to, all the regions use the same brands, we use the same forms, we try to get that image throughout the whole national session. From me for PR, that is it. Thank you.
Well, Yolandi, you're not done, so I hope you've got coffee or something close by, because the next one is the feedback on SASOM.
Yes, so this was a lovely webinar from SASOM, Neurodiversity in the Workplace, addressing the shape-shifting needs of neurodiverse adults. The speaker was Miss Anika Adams. I missed if she is a doctor or a psychologist or what she is. I didn't get that. But she did a lovely presentation. I obviously couldn't include all the slides because it was a bit much. So she had this nice slideshow with all the different disorders, and then the challenges, and then the where they exceed in. So I thought I'm going to focus on the aspects which makes them good workers. I think we all focus, we know what ADD people negatively are, but we don't always realize what the positive aspects are. Okay, so with autism spectrum disorder, they've got strong attention to detail, they've got exceptional focus, proficiency in tasks that require repetitive or analytical thinking, and then detail and routine driven, and punctuality. So I think we can all make that correlation between what's said there and those type of personalities. And then your attention deficit disorders, they are extremely creative. They have the ability to think outside the box. They're problem solvers. They can thrive in dynamic, fast-paced environments. They're very adaptable, and they respond well to positive reinforcement. And then there's a lot of things that was named that I heard for the first time. So like this pathological demand avoidance. They have got exceptional negotiation skills. They're creative, if not avoidant, very resilient in finding alternative ways to approach tasks. Sorry for the noise. It should end now. Thrive in autonomy and creative problem solving. Non-confrontational approach can thrive in positive reinforcement. So one thing that this presenter mentioned, which I understand completely, is if these individuals are not accommodated by management, there's nothing that forces management to accommodate the employees. So there's a bit of a struggle if it's not understood by management. These people cannot be, handled in a way that is easier for them. And then dyslexia, and that other word it's called, dyscalculia. Okay, so they're very good in problem solving. They're very creative. They think in 3D. They recognize patterns easily, and they're very good in setting up new processings or systems. And then the next slide. So there we have all these other things: Tourette's, heightened focus and attention during periods when tics are suppressed. They're very resilient, they're very patient and empathetic, which I actually do understand as well. And then anxiety. So this is a very broad one. She went on for quite a while about anxiety. And she touched a few areas, but I can only put a few things on the slide. So they've got difficulty with communication, sometimes with executive functioning and sensory input, but they recognize you can give them one instruction at a time. And I think that's a lot of times where we drop the ball there, even with our people that maybe come for medicals. So go sit on the chair and go take off your jacket and go stand on the scale, and give them just one instruction at a time. They've got very good organization techniques. They make accommodations known. So they're very vocal on saying, please, I need a quieter room, or I need people to talk softer to me. And they're very good with clear and simple instructions. So again, maybe just don't, throw them with a ball of stuff all at once. You can cultivate their potential by incentives, and then so give them a safe and comfortable place where they feel at ease, they enjoy learning, they feel comfortable, and then you should see a person that thrives. And I'm not sure if there's a next slide. No, thank you.
Thank you, Yolandi. Our marketing portfolio holder, Beverly Jacobs, over to you.
Thank you, Joan. So we've just had a few new providers added to our database this past 2 months. We've had wound care providers, safety, training and services to our database. So if you need any, please do ask. And at our emergency care update workshop, we invited exhibitors from our database to the workshop, and they joined us during each presentation and could benefit from the information presented. And for our Kaleidoscope in July, we will be inviting more service providers. So please make sure that you attend. Raffles and spot prizes were donated by the exhibitors, for which we are always grateful. Thank you. That's my part. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Beverly. If you know of any service provider that we can benefit from, please send an email to Beverly or to your caregiver so that we can pass it on to Beverly to investigate and build our database. Then legislative and Department of Employment and Labour updates. As you already heard from our speaker today, that there's been quite a lot of changes in the hazardous chemical agent regulation. So there's quite a lot of pieces of legislation that's been passed on via SASHA National Office. If you are not getting your emails, please contact the National Office, because then there's a problem with your email. So the important pieces that is out is the SANS codes, which there is numerous of them that is out for draft comments. Go through the document, look at the ones that is relevant to you and your practice, and submit your comments on those draft SAN codes. Then there was the controlled mines and risk work piece of legislation that went out. So please look at it. If you haven't received it, ask one of the committee members to send it on to you. Then the Pharmacy Act, the regulation relating to the practice of a pharmacy, amendment regulations. Once again, the SANS codes, drafts for comments that has gone out. So those are the few important ones, but please go to the email sent by National Office and go and look at that. Our social responsibility feedback today will be from Dorothy Williams. Dorothy, over to you.
Good afternoon all. Yes, it's that time again. So I want to know, how are you going to spend your 67 minutes Mandela Day? So session members, committee members, we're going to be involved at Sensit. It's an old age home in Strand. So we're going to do a ball game, bingo, and we're also going to have a nice cup of coffee and tea. So I want to challenge and invite all other session members to please come and join us. It mustn't be just us that's there at the event. So please join us at Strand on the 18th of July at 12:30. And if you can, if it's possible, if you join us, can you bring maybe one toilet roll and also maybe hand wipes, because that is one of the needs at that old age home. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Dorothy. I challenge our members to join us. Those that joined us for the creche parties can vouch for it. It is very enjoyable. And come and enjoy a cup of tea or coffee with the elderly, and we'll give you a cupcake for being there. Then the newsletter, the first edition for 2024 is currently in progress and should be out soon. Yolandi, you thought you were done, but we've still got student affairs for you. Over to you again, Yolandi.
Thank you. So there's no news from the students as yet. They're on a bit of a break. So if we think back to our student years, let's leave them alone for the 3 weeks. They must enjoy their break. CPUT is still requesting occupational health nurses to make their clinics available for students. They need spaces for their practicals. So if you can just maybe send Natalie an email, if you are willing and able, then she does a bit of an assessment and she lets the student visit you. So if there is anybody who is willing and able to do that, please make contact with Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yolandi. Apologies for jumping in and out of the presentation, but there's still members joining us that's in the lobby, so we're just letting them in the meantime. Under General, the academic day of Nelson Mandela University and PE, the EXCO meeting was held over the May EXCO meeting was held in that time. So I'm handing over to Yolandi to give us feedback on the National Academic Day. Yolandi, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So that was a lovely academic day. We were welcomed. So we did our nurses pledge first. Then there was the Nelson Mandela, University choir. I see that's a Y and not a U. Yeah, they had some of us in tears. They were lovely. And then the first speaker was Michelle Besser, our SASHON president, on the value of occupational health in the workplace. The second speaker was Dr. Amber Anderson. She spoke about the whole self. What is your personal brand? The speaker number 3 was Mr. Biko, such an energetic person. He had us do some exercises and things on strategies to enhance employee well-being. Speaker number 4 was Ms. Lisa Curran on preventing the pencil from breaking. And then Mr. Rob Reiner from... Now I can't remember where he was from, Alexander Forbes. Retiring with enough lead in your pencil. And then the last speaker, Mr. Anthony Jennings, about pathways to personal wellness. You can go to the next slide. There's some pictures again of us. So some take-home messages again. It's just a little bit much to put in a lot of slides. We need to just that the committee of PE did a wonderful job on this workshop. So with Michelle Besser's presentation, some key outcomes for employers. Improve, why do we do occupational health? We want to improve employee health and well-being. We want to have the companies to be legal. We need to reduce sickness, and we want to increase productivity. So if sickness is reduced, your productivity automatically increases. With Dr. Amber Anderson, she left a message with me of life is often lived forward, but we understand it backwards. So you can let that sink in a bit. Read it a few times. It makes sense the more you read it. Then Mr. Biko had an interesting reference about a John Hopkins article, if you want to go and Google it, on absenteeism from work that has higher rates on those people who do not do any exercises or activities. So he is a, I can't remember what he's like exercise.
A biokineticus.
Yes, die woord, that one. Yeah, he was lovely. Okay, and so Miss Lisa Curran left a message of burnout and the ripple effect on families. And then often the workload and the resource are not aligned. So that is the biggest contribution to work to burnout. She had a very, very interesting presentation about burnout. Then Mr. Rob Reiner from Alexander Forbes, he just said, basically told us to start saving as soon as you can, because it will probably never be enough. So he made us a bit scared there. And then Mr. Anthony Jennings, really focusing on the occupational health nurses that are such big influences in the workplace, and you need to take time to recognize the quiet quitters. So the quiet quitters are the people that kind of just come to work and get lost in translation. They're just there, and then they quietly just go quieter and quieter, and then they've got this illness and that illness and this complaint and that complaint. So you focused a lot on them. I think that's it.
Thanks, Yolandi.
Thank you.
Then the second academic day was held on the 13th of June, and it was in at TUT. Also basically to do with the pencil, keeping the pencil sharp. During the day, I have shared highlights of the presentations, just photos of some of our presenters. And the topics were the value of an occupational health program in the workplace by Prof. Yolanda Hafenga, then sharpening the pencil, Department of Employment and Labour with Miss Elise Lawrence and Jabu was in on the changes in legislations, drafts and codes of practice, where they once again handled the hazardous chemical agents. Then keeping the lead in the pencil, he was our biokineticist for the day. And Miss Joyce spoke about preventing the pencil from breaking. If you want to follow somebody on TikTok, I can suggest that you follow her. She was such a dynamic speaker, and really somebody that impressed me a lot. And then Dr. Lerato spoke about burnout prevention, kaleidoscope of colors. Also a very full, productive day presented by Pretoria. Correspondence. So save the date. The biennial research day, which will happen in November. The information was circulated, so take a look at it. Join if you can, and it could be very interesting. It handles artificial intelligence. Then you should have received the SANC notice notifying us about the phased-in implementation of CPDs, long awaited. So this could happen very soon. So start preparing your portfolio of evidence, because once this initial period is implemented, I can see us having this by as soon as next year. Then, is there any items for discussion on at the moment that you would like to discuss, mention? Any information that you would like to share, just raise your hands before we close the meeting.
I don't see any questions or anything in the chat.
Then I would like to thank everybody for attending today's meeting. I noticed that we have had another record for today. Joanette, you can proudly add it to your chart. At one stage, I saw 115 people in attendance. Yes. Thank you very much for making the Western Cape a region that really works. Thank you for every single person that attends these meetings. We really appreciate it. It just gives us the motivation to keep on going. Thank you for the committee for putting the meetings together, for sourcing our speakers, for getting your slide presentations all ready. Have a safe afternoon, and I officially close the meeting. If the committee can just stay behind for 2 minutes after the meeting, the rest of the delegates can sign out. Thank you once again.